Welcome to one of Europe's last great secrets. Romania is not a country that reveals itself at first glance. It wants to be discovered, curve by curve, valley by valley, story by story. Hidden among these mountains are castles older than entire nations, villages where time stopped centuries ago, and legends that fire the imagination of the whole world to this day. Today, we show you the most beautiful places of the land of the Carpathians. Romania is a country that surprises, an island of romance in a sea of Slavic languages. Romanian descends directly from the Latin of the Roman legionaries, a heritage that has survived almost 2,000 years. Anyone who listens closely hears echoes of Italian, Spanish, and French in the language, despite its location deep in Eastern Europe. Hardly any country in Europe unites so much nature in such a small space. The Carpathians sweep through the land like a mighty arc. Their forests are home to the largest brown bear population in Europe. And in the east, the Danube Delta opens up, one of the largest wetlands on Earth, and a paradise for millions of migratory birds. What is more, Romania has changed the world, often without the world knowing it. The inventor Henri Coandă laid foundations of modern aviation, and long before many metropolises glowed with light, the first electric street lamps of the continent already shone in Romania. A country full of contradictions, full of wonders, and still one of the most undiscovered travel destinations in Europe. Our journey begins where the Carpathians embrace a city. Brașov nestles into a mountain basin at the foot of Mount Tampa, and the very first glance reveals why many consider it the most beautiful city in the country. Red-tiled roofs crowd together. Behind them, wooded slopes climb steeply into the sky, and above it all, the city's name towers in white letters, almost like in Hollywood. Except that this is no film set, but 700 years of lived history. At the heart of the old town lies the council square, the Piața Sfatului. Pastel-colored facades frame the cobblestones, and in the center rises the old town hall with its trumpeter's tower, from which watchmen once warned the city of fire and foes. Today, instead of alarm calls, it is the clink of coffee cups that echoes across the square. Street cafes line up beneath the arcades, and anyone who settles here on a summer evening quickly understands why the people of Brasov would never trade their city for another. Only a few steps away, a dark colossus rises into the sky, the Black Church. It is the largest Gothic house of worship between Vienna and Istanbul, and it has borne its name since the devastating city fire of 1689, which stained its walls soot black. Inside, a surprise awaits you. one of the largest collections of oriental carpets outside Turkey, donated by merchants who once returned grateful from their perilous trading journeys. When the mighty Buchholz organ sounds with its roughly 4,000 pipes, the entire nave vibrates. Anyone who wants to see the city from above floats up Mount Tampa by cable car. In a few minutes, it carries you almost 400 meters above the rooftops, and suddenly all of Brasov lies at your feet. A sea of brick red framed by green mountain ranges stacking up to the horizon. On the way back, watch for an inconspicuous detail between the houses. The Strada Sfori, the rope street. At barely more than a meter wide, it is considered one of the narrowest streets in Europe. Brasov is the perfect opening, yet the real treasures of this region lie beyond the city gates. And the first one awaits just a short drive away, on a rock. White letters glow on the hillside long before you reach the village, Rashnov. Above it, on a limestone cliff 200 meters high, watches a peasant fortress as typically Transylvanian as they come. Unlike the palaces of the princes, Rashnov Fortress was built by ordinary people, as a place of refuge into which entire village communities withdrew with their livestock and provisions whenever armies once again marched through the land. Behind the massive ring walls hides a small village in miniature. Narrow lanes, tiny houses, a chapel. From the battlements, the gaze roams far across the Budzenland, and in the distance, the next destination already takes shape. A castle whose name sends shivers around the world. There are places that are greater than their walls. Bran Castle is exactly such a place. Defiantly, it clings to a rock above the pass of the same name, its towers and oriels seeming to grow straight out of the stone, and behind it, the peaks of the Carpathians pile into a backdrop no film studio could design better. Little wonder that of all castles, this one became the home of Romania's most famous legend, Dracula. Bram Stoker, the Irish author of the vampire classic, never set foot in Romania. Yet his description of the Count's castle fits Bran so astonishingly well that the world simply decided this is where he must have dwelt. What is historically documented, at least, is that Vlad the Impaler, the real model for the fictional character, fought in this region and probably crossed the Bran Pass more than once. Anyone who climbs the narrow spiral staircases, slips through low doorways, and looks down into the courtyard from creaking wooden galleries feels something of the magic of this place, despite all the streams of visitors. Hidden secret passages connect the stories, and furniture from the era of Queen Marie tells of the life of the Romanian royal family, who used the castle as a summer residence in the 20th century. But the Carpathians have more to offer than legends. Just a few kilometers to the west, a world awaits in which vampires do not reign, but nature itself. The King's Rock, in Romanian Piatra Craiului, is a 25-kilometer-long limestone ridge that rises narrow and jagged above the forests and ranks among the country's most spectacular hiking grounds. Here, mountain lovers find everything the heart desires: gentle paths through blooming alpine meadows, wildly romantic gorges such as the Zărnești Gorge, where sheer rock faces shoot hundreds of meters into the sky, and demanding ridge hikes with the abyss opening up to left and right. The national park is at the same time one of Europe's last great refuges for brown bears, wolves, and lynx. Especially rewarding is the early morning, when the ridge lies in the first light and the trails are still empty. Above the Prahova Valley, the Bucegi Mountains rise like a fortress wall, their faces plunging vertically for more than 1,000 meters. Up above, however, on the vast high plateau, a landscape awaits as if from another planet, and with it, one of Romania's greatest riddles, the Sphinx of the Bucegi. Over millions of years, wind and weather have shaped a rock that, viewed from the right angle, bears an astonishing resemblance to a human face. Esotericists suspect energy fields and hidden tunnels here. Geologists speak soberly of erosion. However one interprets it, the sight of the rock on the barren high plateau, often wrapped in shreds of cloud, is one of the country's most unusual natural motifs. A cable car brings you up comfortably from Bușteni, which lies at the foot of the mountains. A little mountain town that long stood in the shadow of its famous neighbors, unjustly. For here hides Cantacuzino Castle, a neo-Romanesque jewel with arcades, mosaics, and a park full of grottos and waterfalls. Fans of the series Wednesday recognize it at once. The Netflix production made the estate world-famous as the setting for Nevermore Academy, and brought the quiet Bușteni visitors from all over the world overnight. High above the town, another landmark rises into the sky. On the summit ridge of the Karaman stands the Hero's Cross, almost 40 meters tall, erected in the 1920s in memory of those who fell in the First World War. It is regarded as the highest situated summit cross of its kind in the world, and can still be seen from many kilometers away down in the valley. From up here, we look back one last time on central Romania, before we slowly head west. Some roads simply take you to your destination. This one is the destination. For over 90 kilometers, the Transfagarasan winds through the Făgăraș Mountains, climbing to over 2,000 meters in countless hairpin bends that work their way up a mighty rock face, curve after curve, until the road vanishes somewhere among the peaks. The British programme Top Gear once crowned it the best road in the world, and anyone who has driven the route understands why. Yet it was never intended as a tourist attraction. In the 1970s, Nicolae Ceausescu had the route blasted across the Carpathians as a strategic military road after Soviet troops had invaded Czechoslovakia. The military purpose is long since history. What remains is one of Europe's great panoramic roads. Along the way, waterfalls plunge into the depths right beside the roadway. Flocks of sheep occasionally block the asphalt, and with a bit of luck, a brown bear steps out of the undergrowth. The animals have learned that cars mean food and regularly appear at the roadside. As tempting as the photo would be, keep your distance and do not feed the bears under any circumstances. At the highest point of the route, the reward awaits. Lake Balea, a glacial lake in a rocky cirque, in whose surface the surrounding peaks are mirrored on windless days. On the southern side, the road follows the river Argeș down to the Vidraru Dam, an arch dam more than 160 meters high that spans elegantly between two mountain flanks and, when completed, ranked among the largest in Europe. Important for planning, the high section is usually only passable from July to October because of snow. From the hairpin bends, we now descend to Sibiu, to a city that, in the truest sense of the word, keeps an eye on you. For centuries, Sibiu was the centre of the Transylvanian Saxons, German settlers who were brought into the country from the 12th century onward and laid out their towns after the Central European model. Their heritage is visible on every corner, and part of the population still speaks German to this day. The centre is formed by three interconnecting squares: the Great Square, lined with Baroque townhouses, and the Brukenthal Palace, ranks among the most beautiful squares in southeastern Europe. Behind it follow the Small Square and the Lutheran Parish Church, with its tower more than 70 meters high. In 2007, Sibiu was the first Romanian city to be European Capital of Culture, and this self-assurance can still be felt in the restored Old Town. Between the upper and lower town, the Liars Bridge crosses the alley below, the oldest cast-iron bridge in Romania, built in 1859. It owes its name to several legends. It is said to creak as soon as someone lies while standing on it, or even to collapse should a notorious liar step onto it. So far, it holds. What that says about the people of Sibiu, you may decide for yourself. There are places where the Middle Ages are not a museum, but everyday life. Sighișoara is such a place. The old town on the castle hill is considered the best preserved inhabited medieval fortified town in Europe and stands entirely on the UNESCO World Heritage List. 9 of the once 14 defensive towers still watch over the town wall, each formerly maintained by its own guild: tailors, cobblers, pewterers. The landmark is the clock tower at the main gate, whose Baroque spire glints with glazed tiles in the sun, and whose figure clock has reliably shown the time for centuries. From its gallery, you overlook the entire town. Among the ochre yellow, pink and blue houses of the upper town stands the most history-laden building in Sighișoara, the birthplace of Vlad the Impaler. Around 1431, that Wallachian prince is said to have been born here, the man who later served Bram Stoker as the model for Count Dracula. A few steps further, the covered scholar's stairway with its creaking steps leads up to the church on the hill. Since the 17th century, the wooden roof has protected the schoolchildren from snow and rain. From Sighișoara, a day trip to Viskri is well worth it, about half an hour away over country roads. At its core, the Saxon village consists of a single street with pastel-coloured farmhouses. Geese waddle across the way. Horse-drawn carts are part of everyday life. And over it all watches a whitewashed fortified church from the 12th century. Likewise, a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The place also became famous through King Charles III. The British monarch fell in love with the village, bought a farmhouse, and has for years championed the preservation of the Saxon villages of Transylvania. One can hardly come closer to the rural Romania of centuries past. Seen from the air, a gigantic star lies in the landscape at Alba Iulia. The Alba Carolina fortress, built in the early 18th century under Habsburg rule, is the largest citadel in Romania, a prime example of Baroque military architecture with 7 bastions, magnificent gates, and kilometre-long ramparts whose star-shaped ground plan was meant to deny any attacker access. Today, it is walkers who conquer the restored complex, strolling along the promenades atop the walls and watching the daily changing of the guard in historical uniforms. For Romanians, the city is far more than a fortress. Whoever passes between the Orthodox Coronation Cathedral and the centuries-old Catholic Cathedral strolls through the birth hour of the modern Romanian state. And now the hour of the castles strikes, and the next 2 stations could hardly be more different. In the industrial city of Hunedoara, one of the country's greatest contrasts awaits you. Between the rusting installations of a former steelworks, one of the most impressive Gothic castles in Europe rises up entirely unexpectedly, Corvin Castle. Pointed towers, oriels, a wooden bridge over the moat, the 15th century complex was the ancestral seat of the Hunyadi family, whose most famous member, John Hunyadi, went down in history as a successful commander against the Ottomans. A dark legend links this place too with Vlad the Impaler. For 7 years he is said to have been imprisoned in the castle's dungeons. This is not documented, yet the dungeons in the basement can be visited, and its photogenic silhouette regularly makes Corvin a filming location for international film and series productions. The second castle of this double station is the exact opposite. Not a gloomy fortress, but a royal dream. At the forest's edge above the spa town of Sinaia lies Peleș Castle, described by many as the most beautiful castle in Eastern Europe, and whoever stands before it can hardly disagree. King Carol I had the summer residence built in the Neo-Renaissance style at the end of the 19th century, with half-timbered gables, slender towers, and terraced gardens full of statues and fountains against the backdrop of the wooded Bucegi slopes. Technically, Peleș was far ahead of its time. It is regarded as the first castle in Europe with its own electric lighting, and also had central heating, an elevator, and even a central vacuum cleaning system. Before we slowly head north, one more city that has made history awaits on the border with Hungary and Serbia. Timisoara, too, has always been ahead of its time. As the first city in continental Europe, it received electric street lighting. Here, in December 1989, the revolution began that toppled Ceausescu's dictatorship, and in 2023, it held the title of European Capital of Culture. Because of its Habsburg past, the city is fondly called Little Vienna, and whoever strolls across Union Square understands the comparison at once. Baroque palaces in yellow, turquoise and rosé group around the wide square. In the center gleams the plague column from the 18th century, and on warm evenings the terraces all around fill up. A few streets further, the city shows its elegant side. Around Victory Square, Art Nouveau buildings with sweeping balconies and floral facades line up one after another, a stone legacy of the Danube monarchy that is currently being restored piece by piece. At the end of the square rises the Orthodox Cathedral with its 11 towers and green and gold glazed roof tiles. Here, some of the first shots of the revolution were fired in 1989. Now the route leads north, and the first station lies 120 meters below the ground. Here, a Ferris wheel turns. What sounds like science fiction is reality in Turda. In a salt mine already exploited in the Middle Ages, one of the most unusual amusement parks in the world came into being. A glass elevator descends into a cavern the size of a cathedral. On the walls, the traces of the miners are still discernible, and on the ceilings, salt crystals glitter in the spotlight. Below, a surreal playground awaits you. Alongside the Ferris wheel, there are mini golf courses, billiard tables, and an amphitheatre. And in the deepest chamber, an underground lake across which visitors glide in rowing boats while light installations hang from the ceiling. The salty air is also used for respiratory therapies and is constantly cool, around 10 to 12 degrees. Allow 2 to 3 hours and pack a jacket. Just half an hour away, the secret capital of Transylvania already awaits.
Young, loud, creative, Cluj-Napoca is the pulsing heart of Transylvania. Romania's second largest city is at the same time its most important university centre. Tens of thousands of students shape the townscape, and with the Untold and the Electric Castle, two of Europe's largest music festivals take place here. But the city can also be quiet. The historic centre groups around the Gothic St. Michael's Church and the equestrian statue of Matthias Corvinus, the important Hungarian king who was born in Cluj-Napoca in 1443. The green soul of the city beats in the university's botanical garden. 14 hectares with a Japanese garden, including a tea house, a Roman section with ancient finds, and greenhouses full of palms and giant water lilies. It ranks among the most important botanical gardens in southeastern Europe, and is a welcome pause before the most remote leg of this journey begins. For now, we head to the far north, into a region where time runs noticeably slower. Maramuresh, right on the Ukrainian border, is considered the most traditional region of Romania, and whoever arrives here quickly understands why. In many places, farmers still mow their meadows with the scythe. Haystacks stand scattered across the slopes, and on Sundays, many inhabitants wear traditional costume. Whoever seeks authentic country life will most likely find it in the village of Breb, where among orchards and wooden houses with shingle roofs, a few guest houses have geared up for guests. The region is famous above all for its wooden architecture. The best example is the Barsana Monastery, an ensemble of churches and residential buildings whose slender towers rank among the tallest wooden structures in Europe, joined entirely without nails, solely through traditional carpentry that has been passed down here for generations. 8 wooden churches of Maramuresh stand on the UNESCO World Heritage List. The largest wooden church in the world stands here too. The best-known site of the region, however, is, of all things, a cemetery, and one where people laugh. In the Merry Cemetery of Sapanța, the Cimitirul Vesel, hundreds of grave crosses glow in vivid blue, painted with naive scenes from the lives of the deceased and provided with rhyming epitaphs. Sometimes affectionate, sometimes mocking, often disarmingly honest. A mother-in-law is teased with a wink, or the village schnapps is put into verse. The tradition began in the 1930s with the woodcarver Stan Ioan Patraș. His successors carry it on to this day. To round off the region, a ride on the Mocanitsa from Vișeu de Sus is recommended, the last regularly operated steam-powered forest railway in Europe. Once built for hauling timber, the narrow-gauge train today puffs up the remote Vasa Valley with visitors in open carriages, the whistle of the locomotive echoing off the slopes, and to left and right, forests glide past in which bears and lynx still live. The round trip takes about 6 hours. In high season, you should reserve tickets in advance. From Maramuresh, the route leads across to the east, to the old capital of Moldavia. In the far northeast of the country, just a few kilometers from the border with the Republic of Moldova, the secret cultural capital of Romania awaits. Iași was for centuries the residence of the Moldavian princes, and at times even the capital of the country. Here, in 1860,
the first university of Romania was founded. Here, the national poet Mihai Eminescu wrote his verses, and his favorite linden tree still stands in Copo Park, tended like a monument. The city's landmark is the Palace of Culture, a neo-Gothic monumental building with almost 300 rooms, completed in 1925. From the outside, it looks more like a Flemish town hall than a building on the edge of Eastern Europe. It houses no fewer than 4 museums under one roof, and its clock tower plays a carillon on every full hour. In the evenings, students and skateboarders gather on the steps in front of it. Great history, young life. With that, we leave the country's interior. The final leg leads to where the Danube, after almost 3,000 kilometers, reaches the sea. 2,800 kilometers the Danube has traveled, through 10 countries, past 4 capitals, and shortly before the Black Sea, it transforms itself completely once more. The river splits into 3 main arms, and then breaks apart into hundreds of channels, lakes, and lagoons. The second largest river delta in Europe, a UNESCO World Natural Heritage Site since 1991. There are hardly any roads here. Whoever wants to explore the delta gets into a boat. The starting point is the town of Tulcea, from where guided tours set off into the channels. Those with more time stay overnight in one of the fishing villages within the delta itself. After just a few minutes on the water, the natural spectacle begins. Water lilies cover still sidearms, kingfishers hunt over the channels, sea eagles circle above the treetops. More than 300 bird species live in this labyrinth. The undisputed stars, however, are the pelicans. The delta is home to the largest white pelican colony in Europe, and a flock of these enormous birds in formation flight over the reeds is one of the most impressive natural motifs on the continent. In the villages between the waterways live the Lipovans, descendants of Russian Old Believers who have lived from fishing since the 18th century. The best time for birdwatching is spring and early summer. And where the delta ends, the coast begins. Constanța was founded more than 2,500 years ago by Greek settlers as Tomis, and thus ranks among the oldest continuously inhabited cities in the country. The city's best-known building stands right at the water's edge, the former casino, an Art Nouveau building from 1910 with its characteristic shell-shaped windows. For decades it decayed and was regarded as the most beautiful ruin in Europe. It has since been elaborately restored and once again gleams above the waterfront promenade, while the waves of the Black Sea beat against the pier. North of the city adjoins Mamaia, the largest seaside resort on the Romanian coast, with kilometre-long sandy beaches, hotels, and beach clubs. In summer, the country's tourist centre and the Mediterranean counterpoint to the quiet mountain villages of the north. One final station remains, the largest, loudest, and most contradictory city in Romania. No city mirrors Romania as unsparingly as its capital. Bucharest is splendor and prefab housing, Belle Époque and concrete. Before the Second World War, the city was called the Paris of the East for its boulevards and villas. Then war, earthquakes, and above all, socialist urban planning changed its face. Today, Art Nouveau villas stand next to apartment blocks, Orthodox monasteries next to office towers. And it is precisely this mixture that makes the city of just under 2 million so interesting. Above it all towers a structure of superlatives, the Palace of the Parliament, by floor area one of the largest administrative buildings in the world, and by weight the heaviest building of all. For his megalomania, Ceausescu had an entire city district torn down in the 1980s. Churches, monasteries, and the homes of tens of thousands of people vanished. Over 1,000 rooms, marble from Romanian quarries, chandeliers weighing tons. The dimensions are hard to grasp even on a guided tour. The dictator did not live to see its completion. The revolution of 1989 ended his rule and his life. Today, the Romanian parliament sits in the Colossus. Parts are accessible to visitors, with reservation and ID required. The counter-programme lies only a few minutes' walk away, the old town around Lipscani Street, the city's nightlife quarter. Between restaurants and bars hide some of the most beautiful addresses in Bucharest. The Carturești Carousel bookshop in a restored merchant's house, whose white galleries stretch over 6 stories full of books. The Caru cu Bere beer hall, which has served beneath neo-Gothic vaults since 1879. And the little Stavropolios church, with its quiet inner courtyard amid the bustle. Further north, the Triumphal Arch spans the Kiselev Boulevard, built after the Parisian model in memory of the First World War and the unification of the country. From its viewing platform, the gaze reaches out over the rooftops of a city that reinvents itself again and again. The fitting conclusion to this journey. The Triumphal Arch literally arced the span from medieval Transylvania across the hairpin bends of the Transfagarasan to the pelicans of the Danube Delta. Why is the variety here especially interesting? Romania is still noticeably cheaper than most destinations in Western Europe, easy to travel by rental car, and in many regions still pleasingly uncrowded. Whoever seeks a Europe off the beaten track finds behind the Carpathians one of its most rewarding destinations, a country full of wonders, still only at the beginning of its discovery.
Thank you for watching. We hope you enjoyed our journey today. If you did, feel free to leave a like and a subscribe so you don't miss any further videos. Until next time.